Good afternoon. Welcome back. It's been a minute. Hopefully you still remember who I am. Gabe DeArmond with Power Mizzou, special edition of the live show coming to you. That always means we bring up another window, so you only have to see me in a picture half as large. Today, that is Eric Edholm. He is, I didn't ask you this before. I'm going to call you the draft expert at NFL media. Does that work? Do you like guru? Is there something
Guru? Better? Yeah, I was going to say it's in my contract. You got to say guru. I'm sorry. That's the deal. But
okay. Draft guru, multimedia star, Eric Edholm, between the Senior Bowl, a trip to Florida, the Combine, all the other things you are doing here in the next few months. 3 days after the greatest franchise, 2 days after the greatest franchise on earth, led by the greatest human on earth, has won the Super Bowl. So into the NFL offseason.
Yeah, it is the offseason. I mean, I'm ready for it, let me tell you. Different kind of busy than the regular season. But yeah, congrats to your Chiefs. Congrats to Andy and Pat for being the best at what they do currently, right? Belichick's not even in the discussion anymore. So, you know.
He doesn't even do it anymore. So
he's gonna hang out in Nantucket or whatever. So yeah, unbelievable performance. And we're into draft season now.
Yeah, so the NFL is like college sports. There's no offseason. It's just like a relative term. It means the week, like this week, is basically the offseason. So thanks for spending your offseason with me.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's get into it. And for those of you who don't know, Eric is a fellow Mizzou alum, so has always followed Mizzou guys maybe a little bit more closely than some people who do this. This is a good year for it. 8 guys get combine invites. I don't look, I haven't gone back through lists. I don't remember a year where 8 Missouri players have been invited to the combine. I don't know how long they've been doing it. Like back, the draft class that was like Kellen Winslow and Eric Wright and Howard Richards, maybe, if that was a thing back then. But
yeah, I'm actually pulling it up right now, see if I can do it in real time. I know we were live here, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a minute since they've had that big a crop. I'm kind of looking at the 21 class that had Bolton, Gillespie, Borum, Bledsoe, Roundtree. I don't even know if
all those guys were invited.
Yeah. So that one we can already say this one's got more than that. 2015, Shane Ray, DGB, Mitch Morse, Marcus Golden, Bud Sass, a pretty good class. That had more of the higher picks, I think, maybe than this year. We'll see. But
I believe, according to the NFL scouting combine, that was Oklahoma product, Oriole Green Beckham.
That's right. I guess he's on my database. He's still Missouri, so you're probably right about that. But yeah, you got to go back a minute. I would think maybe the 09 class was probably up there too. But yeah, it's a testament to Eli and what they built there amid all the questions and everything. They clearly have talent. So next year, everybody already knows about Burden as a possibility. I'm not supposed to talk about underclassmen, but we all know his standing in college football.
Okay, so I want to invite those of you who are joining with us live, hit all the buttons you're supposed to hit. If you've got a specific question for Eric, put it in the comments. I'll get to it if I can, but we're going to kind of run through these guys. Let's start with, you were down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl where Darius Robinson spent his week. I believe the technical term for it is making himself a crap ton of money.
Yeah, living in the backfield was sort of his hobby down in Mobile. There's not a lot else to do down there except eat oysters and do that, I guess. But great week for him. Just you couldn't have asked for a better performance and a better showcase for him. I always say that you want to meet GMs and head coaches, stand right by the offensive line, defensive line, one-on-ones. That's where a lot of them hang out. You can kind of see who gets their attention and who's eyes sort of bulge a little bit. And there were plenty of those. I mean, I think in one of my write-ups, I said that the only guy who kind of consistently slowed Darius down in those drills, and they are kind of geared to the defensive player. It's one-on-one. There's no help, there's no structure going on. It's just those two players. But even so, I think Javon Foster was the one guy who had probably the most head-to-head wins against Darius. And, 3 days of practice, these guys cycle through, 100 different times. So you get to face everybody eventually, I think. And, power, quickness off the snap, the long arm move, his 35+ inch arms are going to be very attractive. There's just a lot to like now. We don't know his medical, if there's anything concerning there. We don't know how he interviewed, but people I briefly talked to said, he came off well and there was nothing on their radar. So great week for Darius. And now we're talking about him in that, late first, early second round range.
Yeah, the one thing I can promise he'll do well is interview. One of the better kids to cover here the last few years. But I know, and I apologize for not specifically knowing your mock drafts and where they're at, but there's a million of them out there. And I've pretty consistently seen him like in that 25 to 30 range. A few people do have him, and we know how that goes, right? It's about the team and what they need. And so going 34 isn't worse than going 9. It's just
right.
Cutoff is where we decide it's worse. But is that kind of the upside, or do you think he's a guy that goes into April after the combine where you're pretty confident he's a first rounder?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, there were some members of Darius's family down there, and I didn't get everybody's name. They're all wearing the jerseys and everything like that. And I just sort of had a brief conversation with possibly an uncle. I'm not 100% sure who I was talking to exactly. There was post-practice, a little busy, but I said, what are we thinking? We thinking late first, early second? And the one said, a little higher than that. And I said, oh, okay, interesting. Now, this is a biased version, right? This isn't coming from an NFL team, but their thinking is, their internal belief seems to be that he could maybe end up pushing kind of the middle of the first round. And, truthfully, it's obviously the draft's in Detroit. I know you kind of mentioned that he's a Michigan kid, and that would be a great story for him to be able to go back home and everything. The edge class, if you kind of step back and look at it big picture, I don't know that there's a guaranteed top 10 pick. Maybe Dallas Turner from Alabama, Laiatu Latu from UCLA, age, injury questions, Jared Verse from Florida State. I don't know that he helped himself coming back to school. I don't think he hurt himself necessarily, but he did miss out on a year of salary if he was concerned about that. And those are maybe the top 3 guys, but I could see Robinson, especially to the right team, infiltrating that group because I think he's a different type of edge than the ones I just mentioned. He's definitely different than Chop Robinson at Penn State, or let me think of another guy like Adisa Isaac, his teammate at Penn State. They're more of the smaller, quicker guys who get by on speed. But Darius, his length is going to make him an interesting projection as well. What do you make him? Do you make him a 5 tech? And he's going up against head up on offensive tackles. Do you put him as a kind of a 7 technique, more of a traditional edge rusher? Some people said he's like a Cam Jordan type. That there's a lot you can do with him. Kick him inside on passing downs. He's done that before. So he almost is more scheme diverse than some of the other guys. And you never know, like a good combine workout and great interviews. It wouldn't completely shock me if he ends up being the, second or third guy off the board as opposed to number 4, let's say.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't always trust weights. I think previously he was listed like 300, 305. He played around 280 this year. I know he was 280 something in Mobile.
86.
But
yeah.
Is that, can he play inside in the NFL? Not every down, certainly, but.
Yeah. Kind of like, I don't think he's Chris Jones, but I also think that you could do that with him. I used Cam Jordan. That was the name Daniel Jeremiah gave to me. We were talking between practices, and of course he's the real draft guru at NFL Network. And, but yeah, like kind of that power end, and you'll see Jordan obviously go on stunts inside and work against guards and use his quickness. So yeah, not on an every down kind of snap or basis rather, but you think about Aaron Donald's like 280, his teammates about the other D tackle there, Kobe Turner's maybe 285. So there are some quicker guys in that range that and his length, I think could help him do it.
So you mentioned Javon Foster too. We'll just stick there. Is he a day two type guy? I know he's not a first rounder. Can he go second, third round? Because honestly, coming into this season, he had whatever you think of PFF, had all these grades, and people were so high on him. And look, I'm not going to pretend I sit and watch the left tackle during all games, but it surprised me a little bit. But he had a good year.
He did. Yeah. There's no question about that. And he looked the part down there. I think, first of all, he played a lot of left tackle in practice and then ended up playing a lot of right tackle in the game. and I asked him about our teams looking at you specifically at tackle or also at guard. And he said, yeah, I've been asked about playing guard a lot too. So okay. I think he's kind of one of those tweener. I think he's probably a left guard if I had to guess, like, you know, where he's most likely to be drafted. But it wouldn't shock me if somebody, especially if, you know, if they've missed out on, you know, some of the top guys, and it's a pretty good class at tackle too. So, you know, I could see somebody maybe at the end of day 2. I don't have a great feel, but I would guess, you know, maybe on that day 2, day 3 edge, rounds 3, 4, possibly could slip to round 5. Only, and mostly because there is that question of, does he have the sheer length to play outside? And you know how it is. These NFL people are so stuck on, like, you got to have 33-inch arms. You got to be at least 6'4". You know, I mean, there are always exceptions, but there are some benchmarks that they don't like to go below very often. And I forget his arm length, but it's borderline, you know, and so that'll be the question. Is he a guard or a tackle? And that could change his projection by a full round, maybe.
So perfect example of that. I just want to handle these next 2 guys as like a duo, because it's the perfect example of on-field production versus your numbers tell me where you should go.
Yep.
And anybody that watches Missouri play football the last 4 years says, I love Chris Abrams-Draine. What he has done at quarterback is ridiculous. Now he's 6 foot 173, something like that, right? He's a little dude. Then you got Ennis Rakestraw, and coaches at Missouri have been telling me for a year, Ennis is going to go higher because the NFL teams are going to look at him. They're going to see the size. They're going to see the physicality, and they're going to project him to be something that maybe he hasn't quite been yet. So Ennis is suddenly, everywhere I look, the first Missouri player off the board.
Yeah, I can see it. Right. Obviously, one of those need positions anyway. You know, I mean, there isn't, I don't know if there's a clear-cut number 1 corner too. Maybe Terrion Arnold from Alabama. Maybe it's Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. But I don't think you have to go too far until you get Ennis's name. And we might get, I would probably put the over-under at about 4.5, 5 first-round corners this year. And, you know, I think of him as cornerback 4 or 5. I mean, I think he's right on that cusp of somewhere in the 20 to 30 range, if I had to guess. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, you remember Drink's reaction when he landed him as a recruit. It was such a, you know, viral moment for Mizzou fans or whatever. And
it was just so spontaneous. I didn't feel like anybody planned that at all. For
couldn't have been, right. There's never engineering on these sorts of things, right? But I asked him about him last year, and you know, it was down to the Senior Bowl in Mobile and ran into him. I saw him there this year, but didn't talk to him. But yeah, he was really pumping up Rakestraw over Abrams-Draine at that moment. And you're right. I think the scouting report would be, here's a guy who maybe a little thin build. I mean, still could maybe use a little bit more, but boy, I think he looks pretty darn good with his, you know, over 6 foot, good arm length, really physical, learned how to tackle over his time at Mizzou, became aggressive in that, I feel like. And having a corner who projects to be able to play press man is kind of a big deal. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've like brought up a corner's name, you know, somebody like just say like Chris Abrams-Draine to an evaluator and say, what do you think of this guy? Yeah. You know, 18 passes defended last year, not, you know, 4 picks, whatever. And they'll say, you know, he doesn't fit our scheme. He can't play man or whatever, you know, and not every team plays man that much, but there are some who use it a third of the time, 40% of the time. And they'll love the Rakestraw type, I think, especially I had him going to the Lions, I think at 28 or 9, whatever they're picking, you know? So, and I had Robinson going to your Chiefs. So I had 2 just cracking round 1.
So KAD is, again, like, I don't think Trent McDuffie, and I'm not saying he's Trent McDuffie, but Trent McDuffie is not the biggest dude in the world, right?
Not at all.
And went out and like could have been Super Bowl MVP if they actually voted on who played the best game. And so it can't all be done by measurables, but it seems like KAD's another guy, like maybe day 2, maybe day 3, and like probably going to have to prove some things in the camp.
And a quick story on Super Bowl MVP voting. I don't know if they do it this way anymore, but like I remember my first Super Bowl and they handed me a ballot with like 10 minutes left
third
in the
quarter.
Yeah, going, okay, time to vote. Like, wait a minute, it's a tie game. Like, who the heck am I voting for, right?
Right.
So those things are that way for a reason. I mean, but yeah, you could figure out why some MVPs are kind of head scratchers. But I think Chris is probably a nickel. But like you said, I mean, Trent plays inside a lot, and he had a huge impact on their season and that game. So, this is no slur. Look at Brian Branch in Detroit. Now, I know he played a little safety too, but he was arguably their, second best rookie on a team that had 4 really good rookies. So the position matters. It hasn't always translated to the draft. That's the problem. There seems to be a bias. Branch was picked 45th. McDuffie was a first rounder, and he could play outside too. But I do think there will be a little bit of the size thing held against Chris. And I think you saw it in the Tennessee game. You saw it in the Florida game. Teams try to go up top on him. They try to test him vertically and use that lack of length against him. He didn't like that I brought up that example, by the way. I said, I asked him about those situations. He kind of looked at me like, geez, bringing up the bad stuff on me. But, he is an impressive athlete.
Guess what, Chris? Welcome to the NFL. That's all they're going to bring up.
I'm prepping you for your combine interviews, dude. He was fine. I just think he was a little taken aback when I sort of
after no job interview has ever included the question, why were you so awesome that one day?
Yeah, I'll work on my my questioning angles a little bit. But yeah, he's for a guy who came to Mizzou, I don't think having played much DB, his footwork is terrific. I mean, his instincts are terrific. And obviously the ball production is exactly what you want. Highest level of football, facing SEC receivers. There's a lot to like. Now, I mean, he looked really good against normal size receivers down there. And then they put him up against Johnny Wilson from Florida State, 6'7", 230 pounds. And you can imagine how that one went. So I think size is the biggest issue.
He can't cover a tight end one-on-one. We know that.
I know, right? I think that's a little silly that they do that, but I get it. So yeah, if I had to guess, somewhere in the 80 to 110 range, which puts them right at the end around 3. But, a lot can happen between now and April.
All right. So those are the 4 guys. Like, you agree. Those 4 guys are getting drafted. They hear their name at some point.
100%.
For sure. Yeah.
I would be surprised if we didn't get 3 of them in the first 2 days. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we've got 4 guys that, like, I think decent chance, but I don't know what to think about Tyron Hopper. Like, just on-field production. If he'd have come out last year, I felt like, hey, man, that's an NFL player. This year, he was a little banged up, production a little bit down. I mean, is he, like, am I underselling this? Is he a surefire draft pick somewhere, or is there a chance he doesn't get his name called?
Yeah, no, I thought it was unfortunate that he had to back out, apparently injury-related or, rehabbing, what have you, down at the Senior Bowl, because linebackers can be tricky in this generation anyway, right? Like they have to have some sort of special quality to them, and athletically, I don't know where he's going to test. That's my biggest worry. And you're right. I mean, I haven't broken him down scouting I haven't sat there and done like a Tyron Hopper day, but just anecdotally and from my memory, the 2022 season was far better individually. Yeah, he was often the best player on their defense at times. So it felt like he was a tick slow on some plays, or wasn't trusting his eyes, or, got beat to the edge, wasn't fast enough, physical issues, whatever. Not to say that he's not a terrific football player. He may have been playing hurt. So the interviews and the health, quotient will matter when he gets to Indy. And yeah, I'm conflicted. I don't really think we can say that he's a guaranteed pick at this point. But again, a good football player, there are a lot of them who have to go that route to prove themselves in the NFL.
All right. So as long as we're talking linebacker, here's the guy I want to go to next. Because when J.C. Carlies went to the East-West Shrine Bowl and came in at 6'3", 231, I thought,
what the heck?
That's a kid you put at outside linebacker. And he's a fast as hell outside linebacker. And like, he can hit. We know he can hit. If there's been a question at Missouri, I feel like it's been maybe the cover skills a little bit. So, like, Is that nuts to think this kid could play line? He's only, I looked it up. He weighs 12 pounds less than Willie Gay.
Right?
That's not that much.
No. And there are plenty of 230-pound. Now, maybe they're more sub-package guys, but there are smaller linebackers these days because they're asking them to cover and rush the passer. The traditional stack and shed linebacker, like, the Katzenmoyer types, they don't really exist anymore. And that also works against Hopper, but it may work towards JC's favor where he could be either a box safety or a rover of some kind of, who's closer to the line of scrimmage, which I think, if you watch like the second half of the LSU game, I think was where I first noticed it. Like his angles to the ball, especially for a fast guy running like Jaden Daniels, it just like it leaves something to be desired. And if you shorten that distance at that weight and height that you just mentioned, it's almost like, geez, why wasn't he up there to begin with? So I was shocked. I did not know he was 230 pounds. You always see a couple measurements that kind of make you, is that bigger than William Moore? Like, I mean, William Moore was rocked up like a superhero.
I'd have to look, but I bet it is.
That's amazing. Yeah. So he could be one of those players. And again, I know he was at the East West, and I didn't talk to Eric Galco or the guys out there about how he did, but I still think he's probably a deeper day 3 guy if I had to guess, but interesting nonetheless, all of a sudden.
Out of the guys we're talking about, there's no guy who I think could maybe help himself more in Indianapolis because, like, I think he's going to go run a time that makes people go, oh, wait. Like, I think his combine performance might be better than what people see on tape from him in the last couple of years.
And you know what? I mean, obviously there's probably some room to grow, but I remember seeing him as a sophomore and thinking, wow, who's this guy? He's interesting, and felt like he never quite elevated his game consistently. There were plays, sure, flashes here and there, and sometimes he didn't have to do that much, but I agree. I don't know. The tape is misleading or not misleading. It's a little confusing sometimes where you think, I'd like to see a little better instincts. Sometimes he takes some false steps. He can get a little bit turned around, but yeah, I agree. I think, I hadn't really, to be honest, hadn't thought about it till you brought it up, but I think if you consider the move and then see those testing numbers, if he puts up what people, are saying now he could do, all of a sudden that kind of changes the profile on him. We've been grading him as a safety and saying it's a mixed bag. Now look at him as a linebacker. That could be a different set of results right there.
Well, we've got a big personal fan to yours. Craig Liebig appears to actually know you, so he says hello. So.
He does know me. I just saw him at the Tennessee game, so that was
there you go.
What's up, Liebig?
There you go. We're bringing your personal friends in to bump the viewership numbers.
I had no idea he'd come in, right?
So I intentionally left these two for last because they're the most fascinating to me. First of all, like, do kickers run the 40 at the combine? Is that a thing?
Well, I remember distinctly. Well, first of all, there was a punter who put up like 20-something reps on the bench. It's optional. Okay. They can do whatever they want. I don't really have to.
I want Harrison Mevis to opt into running the 40. I want to see it.
Somebody on your board, I noticed before I hopped on, said, let's do the Rich Eisen challenge. Like, let's get him and Rich running side by side. Maybe you have a decent race there, but yeah, I mean, they also don't put remember the Tom Brady, like where he's looking all kind of skinny and gross and stuff. Like, they don't do those photos anymore, apparently. So we don't get the body shot, unfortunately, but we'll see. Is
like tackling ability, not tackling ability, but look, if you're going to be in the NFL, you got to kick off, right? Like, is that something that's going to matter to teams that, hey, the guy's probably like isn't going to be the most athletic guy as our last line of defense. If anybody, I mean, nobody ever returns kickoffs anyway, but like we get down to the dumbest minutia in these draft picks, right? Like, so like, does something like that matter?
Here's my thing is like, if you're going to spend a draft pick on a kicker or a punter, right? I mean, it happens. There's, I would say, I don't know the numbers, but I would guess there's an average of about total kicker, punter, long snapper combined. You might get 5-6 picks a year, an
average. That's honestly more than I would have guessed 1 or 2.
Yeah. Some years it's 0 for one position and 1 for, so yeah, we had a couple years ago, we had a run on punters, but like, They would have to be pretty special and have no major weaknesses, I would think, to get drafted. That's the case working against them probably. But like you said, kickoffs have been so diminished in this game, in the NFL game now, and college to a degree. And it also, there's a lot of punters who do kickoffs, so that's not necessarily an issue if his distance is a question mark. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to be drafted, you have to be Jake Moody good, and Moody was not as an NFL rookie, but as a college kicker. And I'm sure they'll ask him about what happened in that weird stretch 2022. And also what happened, I guess, the beginning of this year. He was still looking a little funky, right? I mean, he did. I don't remember him missing too many kicks after the first couple games. So, yeah, the kicking is the bottom line, but obviously, and it sounds different coming off his foot. Like, that's the one thing when the kickers are doing it in the stadium. And last year was my first year to actually be in the dome during it. I know it sounds silly, but like you can hear a difference between a powerful kicker hitting it in an empty dome, quiet. It's spooky, and sometimes that's what evaluators go off of. It's crazy to think, but that's a part of it, at least.
I always kind of hate the argument, like it's better to be undrafted than a 6th or 7th round pick, because then you can, because I feel like a lot of times that's what people say to make themselves feel better about not getting drafted. Right. But in the situation of a kicker, I honestly kind of believe it, because there's only 32 of these jobs. Nobody's keeping a backup. So if you're undrafted, at least you can look and say, all right, well, I've got a better chance to beat this guy out than I've got to beat that guy out.
Yeah. I mean, and real quick, the only advantage, like other than where you get to pick where you sign, I mean, Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant, right? He cannot, by the CBA rules, sign an extension this offseason because he was drafted. But if he was undrafted, different story. So that's one of those weird deals that I didn't even kind of realize until this story had evolved a little bit. But and what was the original question? I'm sorry. We were talking about
just about kickers kind of being able to pick their spot,
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about, because obviously if you have, like, take the New England Patriots, they use a 4th rounder on Chad Ryland from Maryland this year. I thought he was, the second best kicker, and I was like, geez, 4th round, They stuck with this dude all season long during a miserable season because they kind of had to, because it would have looked awful if they'd cut their 4th round pick. So that may be the one kind of, you're almost guaranteed a spot for year one. But I'm with you. I mean, like, most teams are probably going to lean towards not drafting one of those guys, and they'll make them a priority. Like, if they have to spend a little extra in bonus money to get the kicker they want, they'll do it. So yeah, I think in his case, maybe it would not be a failure if he didn't hear his name in the first 255 picks or whatever.
So by far the most interesting one. I mean, if I would have told you 6 months ago, we're going to sit down and talk about whether Cody Schrader is getting drafted in the NFL.
Yeah, right.
I mean, like, I would have told myself I was an idiot. You wouldn't have had to say it. Is Cody Schrader going to get drafted in the NFL?
I think so. Yeah. And even as late as November, I'm watching him tear somebody up, and I'm thinking, I hadn't really thought of him as a prospect yet. Like, I got to do that all of a sudden, It's just sort of weird to be in that headspace. But, so I texted a few people, and they're like, is he? And oh yeah, this is before he had announced, gotten the Senior Bowl invite and everything. And they said, yeah, he's on our radar. I don't think I was getting round projections or anything. So yeah, I mean, it's taken me a little while to sort of realize he may not fit like what we think of as an NFL running back size-wise or speed-wise, but I'll tell you, here's a good one. I had a conversation down in Mobile, and somehow Schrader came up with a guy who I don't even know if he knows I went to Mizzou. We were talking about somebody else at first, and I was like, who does he remind you of? And he kind of smiled. He goes, all right, now this is a big name. I want you to listen to what I have to say. And he's sort of prefacing it all. That I'm like, what's he going to say? Herschel Walker? What's he going to – No, actually, he said Emmitt Smith. He said that's who he reminds him of style-wise. And I went, and it took me a second. I went, okay, I kind of see what you're saying. As far as Emmitt wasn't a burner. Emmitt was thickly built, 5'10" range. Cody's 5'8", 5'9", whatever. 210 pounds. Cody's 207. Okay, what did Emmitt excel at? Catching swing passes, making guys miss in open space, seeing those small holes, finding a crease, knowing exactly where to go, how to, tempo and timing wise and everything. He was brilliant at it. He was always falling forward. Like, that's the one thing with Cody, I mean, he would get smashed and he would tumble forward an extra half yard, 2 yards, whatever it was.
His bad runs were 2 yards instead of negative 2 yards.
Yep. I mean, tell me there isn't a value for that, right? And down in the Senior Bowl, I still think he has to work on his pass receiving a little bit. I think third down, especially he's got real short arms, 28 inches. That's as low as a number as I can recall at that position. I mean, there's maybe Tariq Cohen was a little shorter than that, but
I'm going to measure my arms after this conversation, by the way. I just
little T-Rex arms. Yeah. I don't know that I've ever had mine measured. That's pretty special, but yeah, Cody, I mean, he's got some limitations and he's not going to be a scheme fit everywhere, but I will say that I'd almost be shocked if he wasn't a day 3 pick at this point. And I think in the right system, man, zone blocking scheme, he could be a perfect complementary guy.
Well, and I hope you bought that guy in Mobile who compared him to Emmitt Smith a beer for being the first guy to ever not compare a white running back to Mike Allstott.
Yeah, well, that's true, right? Or like, yeah, who are the other ones? That's probably the good one there.
If you're a white slot receiver, you're either Wes Welker or you're Wes Welker.
Yep. So, right. Julian Edelman. Right. Yeah. I had a great story from Senior Bowl years ago where I asked, like, why don't they I asked all the white receivers, have you ever been compared to a black receiver? And one of the North Carolina kid was like, damn, I never thought of that. I haven't, and he was really angry at that point. So you're on to something.
It all started back with Jason Sehorn. Every white DB was Jason Sehorn for 24 years. So.
He's still the archetype for white corners, right? Until Cooper DeJean comes along this year. Yeah,
exactly. All right. So last one on Cody, just like, you don't get drafted because of your story. Like, you've got to be good enough. But I've got to imagine the story and the hype and what he will bring to a camp. Like, I think it's a tiebreaker. If you've got him and one other guy and they're like dead even on your board, why not take the guy with that story who is going to come in and bust his ass every day?
Well, because part of the story is this insatiable drive, right? This work ethic that speaks for itself. And he'll get obviously glowing reviews from everybody at the program. And, which doesn't always happen. People say, well, of course they're going to pump up their own guys. Oh, no.
Like, I mean, I know guys who specifically believe the reason they weren't drafted is because of what coaches said when the NFL came in.
You'd be shocked, because if you don't get a good review from Mizzou or any other school for that matter, the coaches or the scouts are going, I mean, like, they want him to succeed. I mean,
right.
But...
Well, also people think, well, why would a kid not get a good review? And sometimes a coach knows not good enough. And I can't tell a scout he's good enough, and he shows up and they cut him 3 days in, because then they come back next year and go, I'm not going to believe anything you say.
Exactly right. I've heard that story so many times where people say, look, I'm honest with these guys because otherwise they won't believe me the next time, and they'll think everything I say is full of garbage. So yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think Cody will get a glowing recommendation. He'll interview well. He's a humble kid. I think that has to be part of it. There's always an intangible grade that teams put on there, and different teams do it differently, but character, or however you want to phrase it, whereas some guys are going to have the little red check next to it, which is a bad thing. He's going to get the blue plus or whatever, which is a good thing. And so, yeah, at that phase of the draft, like, you're looking for guys who will either be able to make the team. Really, the 4th round is kind of the cutoff. And like, if he's not, like, we want somebody who's going to be working his tail off on the practice squad and be good for scout team and good for give our guys good looks. And I mean, like, maybe that's the route he has to go. Maybe it's like part of his story, right? Where we say, oh, he should be a 5th round pick for sure. And then he goes undrafted and we go, what the heck? And then he proves us wrong again. I mean, it wouldn't completely stun me, but I think at this point I would be a little bit surprised.
So the over-under for guys drafted here is probably right around 6. We know 4 of them are. We think Cody probably is. Then you got Carlies, Mevis, Hopper, like one of them. Maybe two of them, but maybe one of them. So right in that range. Is there anybody? Look, you follow Mizzou, like I said, more closely than most of the national guys do. So I wouldn't ask, some guys this question, but is there anybody on this team that like isn't going to the combine that you could see just wows at pro day? Niles Gaddy, Chad Bailey, Nate Pete, some of these guys that aren't on the radar, but maybe does something this spring to suddenly like, hey, flyer in the 6th or 7th round.
Is Delgado a senior?
Delgado, yep.
Yeah, Delgado, maybe one of them. Bailey would be there'd be some health questions, I think. Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
I mean, Nate Pete is fast, but the production's never been there.
Yeah.
Gaddy, I think, has he has some traits, I don't know what he'll necessarily do at pro day, but, like Jaden Jernigan, I don't think that's I don't see a way that
can't body. Yeah, he's the can't body type. You hear like the guy you bring in to fill out your 90-man roster once you've gotten up to 75 or 80 with your draft picks or whatever. So yeah, those are the ones off the top of my head again without Niles Gaddy. I mean, especially when you think about how much Robinson and Walker played this year or whatever, like, this wasn't a lot of snaps left over, I would imagine. So it's always interesting to see players there was a kid at Alabama, I'm forgetting who it was. Like he started one game in his career, he ended up getting drafted. So there are exceptions where, well, Christ, he was behind two All-Americans.
It's the Matt Castle thing.
Matt Castle, perfect example. Yep, exactly. So, Bailey, obviously good football player, has some rush ability in blitzing and stuff, but yeah, I mean, that would be more of a UDFA camp invite type, I would guess.
All right, we got a lot of just general draft fans, so just a couple minutes, and I know I'll let you go. Like Caleb Williams got to go 1-1, doesn't he? I'm
here in Chicago.
Whether it's the Bears or somebody else, I don't. But like you're hearing about these 3 quarterbacks, there's no way that either of these other guys are getting picked before Caleb Williams gets picked, right?
If there's one of them that does, it's Drake May. I talked to one guy who's not a GM, but he's a scouting director, so third in command, basically, essentially, or for his team, who said, I personally would take Drake. And a little bit was, they both came from air raid systems. They both had better 22 seasons than they did 23 seasons. Both are unusual physical talents, although, Caleb's a little on the small side. I guess if you had a team that was a little more hung up on quarterback measurables, they might favor Drake. If they felt like, of the two, I would say maybe Drake has a little bit more untapped potential, where you felt like, boy, if you put him in a more demanding system, it could yield better results over the long term and give him, a little more responsibility at the line of scrimmage. But I wouldn't be wagering massive amounts of money on anyone else going 1 for right now, mainly because I don't have enough information to dispel that. But I would say, like right now, 80-20 would be my guess of the likelihood of Williams going 1 and May 2nd. But again, from February to April, things change so much, and it really is it's a catch-up game.
2 purely selfish questions to finish.
Yeah.
Who ends up being the best quarterback in this draft class, and why is it Michael Penix?
Yeah, I mean, I know
my favorite college football player in a long time.
And you know what? Like he and Daniels, I think, have obviously enough college experience at this point. Both played at 2 schools, both started as freshmen, both did good things at both places. Those are probably the 2 that, if I had to guess, in the right situation, could come in and have the best rookie year. Like, it wouldn't shock me if Michael Penix went to the Raiders and beat out Aiden O'Connell, right? I mean, nobody would, or, the Bucs decide they don't want to re-sign Baker. They're gonna let Kyle Trask beat out, vie for with a rookie. They're picking 26th, Mm-hmm. If Penix tests out medically well, and that's a big ask because we're talking about 2 ACLs and 2 shoulder injuries, that's sort of the biggest thing. The age, he was Joe Burrow's age. That doesn't bother me. He's actually a little younger than Burrow coming out. So the biggest question is, will he test well medically? If he does, arm talent wise, it's he and Caleb are the only two that I think you can put in that like top tier of like these dudes can sling it as well as anybody currently in the NFL, or almost as well. And the others would be, May would be close. Daniels would be a little farther down, I think, talent wise.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Penix he's sort of the X factor for me. He could go anywhere from 25 to 75, and it wouldn't shock me.
All right, last thing, how do we reverse engineer round 1 to make it so that somehow the Kansas City Chiefs draft Brock Bowers, who takes over for Travis Kelce after Travis retires after next year?
Oh my goodness. I mean,
because I have dreams about this. This is my personal draft fantasy, which I know will never happen.
I know. Yeah. It would be worse if, let's say, Jim Harbaugh took him in number 5. Yeah, I know that's high, but I mean, you put him with Justin Herbert too. Like, I'm just saying, man, that would be, you wouldn't be happy, 2 weeks. Of course, they're the Chargers for right now.
I've seen it. I mean, if he wants to go 9-8 every year, that's fine. I've seen it.
I think he's the one guy who's going to win there, man. I don't know.
Oh, I just meant Bowers. Yeah, no. They'll win the offseason again.
Bowers,
and be the West champs, and it's fine.
Bowers. Did you see that picture of him next to Gronk at the Super Bowl? Like,
I did not.
They were just getting off a show or a stage or something. Gronk, was 6'6", 265 when he came out. So Bowers is going to look smaller than him. He's listed 6'4", 230. If he's 6'4", then I'm 6'9". I mean, without the afro, right? I could not believe the size difference. Now, maybe it was the angle. Maybe there was a little bit of, trick photography happening here. But I'm telling you, if he measured in at 6'2 3/4 and 222 pounds, it wouldn't shock me. That's going to be a big debate all of a sudden.
Then let him fall. Let him
fall.
Then
that's my point. Is that
32.
Hey, he gets in the late 20s and he starts getting a little itchy, makes the move up. You never know.
All right. Well, if you make this happen, if you can change his card at the combine or something, 98, the Chiefs can draft him, and I owe you dinner in Chicago next time I'm up there.
I think you owe me more than that. I'd get fired, but yeah,
okay.
A good dinner. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can't cover much beyond dinner. That's all the budget allows. But all right, man. Appreciate your time. I know it kept you way too long. I know you got a lot of stuff to do, but
good.
We'll be in touch, man.
Good hearing from you, dude.
All right. Thanks a lot. That's Eric Edholm. Once again, Guru, NFL Draft Guru from NFL Media. Does a great job. Seriously, I've talked to Eric all the time, not just about NFL stuff. He's a Mizzou guy. You guys can catch him on our message boards, and a super knowledgeable football guy, both pro and college. So appreciate him taking some time. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hit the like button, subscribe, share, all that. I'll put this up as a podcast. If you listen to it, leave some nice comments. Talk to you next time.